Hey folks, how you doing? Right, I thought today I would do a completely different video. Just as a little bit, I've had a lot of new subscribers, a lot of new followers recently. So I thought I'd come along and just do a completely different video on 5 things that you didn't know about me. 5 things that you didn't know about me. Okay, so let's just get started. Let's get straight into this. The first thing, number one, I started my first business at the age of 14. And I was always very entrepreneurial at school. So I saw the tuck shop making so much money. And I thought, you know what? I reckon I could have a little go at doing something similar. So I used to take deposits off my fellow students for popcorn and chocolate and cans of roller cola. And I then used that deposit to go to the local supermarket and buy all of that produce and then sell it back to them the next day at a similar price, if not a little bit lower than the local school tuck shop. Now, I did this for probably about 6 months until I got rumbled, and sadly somebody put me in, and my mum and dad had to go to the school and had to explain why I was doing what I was doing. And anyway, instead of encouraging me like you'd think and maybe going into a joint venture partnership or something similar, they stopped me from doing it. So I wasn't allowed to do it anymore with the threat of suspension. So that was my first business. I went on to do lots of other things, folks, from there, loads of other different things. But that was the first one. So from that point then, so when I left school, I actually joined the army. And a lot of people don't know this. I don't talk about it a lot because it was a long time ago. So I left school at 16. I joined the army at about 16 and a half, maybe 17. And I joined the Army Catering Corps. Don't laugh. I wanted to be a chef, and I thought, well, I can join the army and potentially learn how to be a chef at the same time. So I did, and I went and enrolled. I don't know how I got in. I just did. I got in. And before I knew it, I was leaving the Army Careers Office and heading off onto a train what felt like a few months later to enroll and join the army. And that was it. I was in. I was at St. Omer Barracks. And I became a soldier. Haven't really got that many fond memories of being in the army, if I'm completely honest with you. But I didn't last very long. I didn't enjoy it at all. I was young. It was my first time away from home properly. So I only lasted about 3 months. I didn't even pass out. So I did my basic training and decided it wasn't for me. So I left. And that was my army career over pretty much before it began. So from that point, I didn't know what to do. I was still quite young. I was only still 17, just coming on to 18. And there was a job advertised in my local paper to recruit commie chefs at the local supermarket, the local hotel, not the supermarket. And I applied and I got the job. So I kind of then became a chef. And I was a commie chef, which meant that, oh, hang on, what's going on with my camera? Sorry about that. So yeah, I was a commie chef and became, unbeknownst to me, the start of my catering career. So I liked it. I was quite good at it. So I decided to study at college. So I went part-time at college to study catering. And whilst I was working at the local hotel as a commie chef, and I became qualified as a chef. Back then it was called City and Guilds. And I became qualified with City and Guilds, what was then called 7061 and 7062. And that was it. I was a chef. And I started to work then for a company called Greenall Whitley. And I worked as a chef. I did quite well. And then I got promoted at a very early age of 20 as a relief manager. And a relief manager is basically somebody that will look after, hotels, look after pubs and stuff for the managers whilst they go away on holiday. And I did that. I was 20 years old and I was working as a relief manager around the country, going and looking after people's properties for them whilst they were on holiday and for other different reasons. And then I met my future wife, Mrs. G. So I was 20 years old. Mrs. G was just coming up to 17. And we met at a restaurant that I was running as a relief manager. And then after being together about a year, we said, you know what? I reckon we could do this ourselves. So we went off and bought a lease on a pub and then owned our own pub So all of a sudden, we had a pub, which was ours, and we were still really young. The pub did really well, and we decided at that point, after about 3 years, I still had this burning fire, and this burning fire was for me to become a police officer. It's something I always wanted to do as a child, something that I never got around to doing. And I thought, if I'm going to leave it any later, I'm not going to get in. I'm going to be too old or unfit. So I applied to join the police and I got in. So we leased the pub out. We kept the freehold and we leased it. And I became a police officer. So I was an operational response police officer for about a decade, 10 years. I was an acting sergeant. I was qualified as a sergeant. And I loved the job. I was going up the career ladder. I was on response. So I was like the person, me and my team were the people that would come out if you had any emergency issues, i.e. 999. Let's go inside the house, it's getting a bit windy here. So I became a police officer. And I absolutely loved it. And Lorraine and I decided at some halfway point we were going to start trying for kids. Now, it took a little while for Lorraine and I to have children, but we did. And then that's when Ben came along. And Ben came along quite premature, and he developed brain damage during the birthing process, which sadly meant that Ben had quadriplegic cerebral palsy, which is the condition that he's got now. And I have talked about this last little piece, that one night I came home from work as my job as a police officer, and I spoke to Ben, and Ben said to me, "Dad, why can't I play football like my friends?" Because Ben can't walk, he's in a wheelchair. And that was the life-changing moment that led me into what I do now. And that's because, sadly, Ben can't play football, not in the conventional way, which meant that at that point, I made a promise to Ben. I said, "Look, I'm going to help you through this, and I'm going to help you get to play football." And I knew that I couldn't do that in my current job as a police officer because I didn't have the money, I didn't have the time. So I gave up my job as a cop. It was a massive risk. It was a huge thing to do. It was my only income. But I did it. Started up my property business full time. Whilst I was in the police, I dabbled around with property a little bit, and we had a little bit of property already that we'd accrued over the years, but never anything serious. So I decided to go into property full time, and I did. And that's what led us to where we are now. And during that period of me leaving the police, within 6 months, I managed to replace my police income through property investing. And within 12 months, I managed to put together Worcester's very first disability power chair football club for children with disabilities. So Ben got to play football. And that's my story, folks, really. That's kind of a very whistle-stop journey from when I left school to where I've got to now. And here we are. So anyway, thank you all. And thank you all to the new subscribers and the new followers. Please do make sure you leave a comment below. Let me know if I can help you in any way. I'll see you later.